This tutorial has been designed to help you to understand cross-sectional anatomy, and you can see that we're using a piece of software known as the Virtual Human Dissector. There are three windows in this software. The large window you see here shows a three-dimensional representation of the human body. The upper window on the right is a navigation window, and the lower window on the right shows a body slice, which is taken at the level that this blue and green plane of section is on the 3D window. So you can see that as we're scrolling up and down the body, the plane of section changes accordingly. When you're looking at cross-sectional images like this, horizontal images, you should apply the same convention that radiologists do, which is that you should interpret the image as if you're looking at it from the feet upwards. We're interested in the heart today, so we're just going to add in the heart now and look at that in isolation. I'm going to remove some of these structures here so that we've got a nice simple view of the heart. So there are 4 chambers to the heart. We've adjusted the body slice now. In this tutorial, it's a good idea if you continually try to refer between the 3-dimensional window here and the 2D window, and that should help you to confirm some of those complex anatomical relationships that we're looking at today. So here's our 3D view of the heart. You'll note that when we click on a structure in the 3D window, it's highlighted, and it also highlights in the 2D window as long as the plane of section corresponds. So here's the right atrium of the heart, here's the right ventricle, here's the myocardium of the left ventricle, and up here you can see the wall of the left atrium. We're interested in the great vessels, so we'll add in the aorta, and you can see that there are lots of branches coming off the aorta, so we'll get rid of some of the smaller ones and just leave the larger ones to concentrate on. So here's the aorta, and you can see that there are 3 parts to the aorta: the ascending aorta, the arch of the aorta, and the descending or thoracic aorta, which travels behind the heart. And you can see that here, highlighted and travelling behind the heart in the cross-section. You can also see that the orientation of the aorta is such that it lies in an anterior to posterior direction. And you can see that clearly here. There are 3 major vessels that come off the arch of the aorta. On the right, the brachiocephalic trunk. On the left common carotid artery, and the left subclavian artery. We'll also take time now to look at some other structures in relationship to the arch of the aorta. The first one we'll look at here is the esophagus. So here's the esophagus behind the arch of the aorta, and anterior to the esophagus is the trachea. So we've added in and highlighted the tracheal cartilages here, with the esophagus behind. So the trachea lies behind the arch of the aorta, and the esophagus lies behind the trachea. We're now going to add in the pulmonary trunk. The pulmonary trunk, highlighted in red here, is receiving deoxygenated blood from this chamber of the heart, from the right ventricle. Deoxygenated blood flows out into the pulmonary trunk, which then divides into the right and left pulmonary arteries on either side. So actually the pulmonary trunk and the arteries form a T shape underneath the arch of the aorta. Each pulmonary artery then further subdivides into these segmental arteries that penetrate through the lung, carrying deoxygenated blood, which is oxygenated out in the lung tissue that you can see here. So you can see the profiles of these segmental arteries. Once the blood is oxygenated in the lung tissue, it is returned to the heart, to the left atrium, via 2 pairs of pulmonary veins. So we've now added in the pulmonary veins. You can see these here. The pulmonary veins sit below the pulmonary arteries. The pulmonary veins are receiving veins, segmental veins, carrying oxygenated blood now to the pulmonary veins, the superior and inferior ones on the left here, to empty into the left atrium. You should be able to relate the orientation of these vessels here to the hilar surface of the lung. When you look at the hilum of the lung, you'll note that the profiles of the pulmonary veins lie inferior to the profiles of the pulmonary arteries. I'm going to add and highlight the pulmonary veins now, and you'll see again that they penetrate through the lung substance. We're now going to remove those vessels and add in the superior vena cava. You can see that the superior vena cava, shown here, empties into the right atrium of the heart. It's carrying deoxygenated blood from the head and neck, from the upper limbs, and from the chest wall. There are two major vessels, two major veins that form the superior vena cava, or the SVC. And you can see them at this level here. I'm going to scale up this cross-section. Here are the lungs, here's the esophagus, here's the trachea, and here are the two profiles of the brachiocephalic veins. The left brachiocephalic vein and the right brachiocephalic vein unite to form the SVC, which empties into the right atrium. So if we scroll down now, slice by slice, you should see the profile of the left brachiocephalic vein travels towards the right as we move across the left brachiocephalic vein. And this vein sits obliquely behind the manubrium of the sternum. So we'll now do that. We'll move down one slice at a time. Here's the left brachiocephalic vein, uniting with the right brachiocephalic vein to form the SVC. Here's the SVC. Note that at this level, for the formation of the SVC, we're now crossing through the arch of the aorta. If we keep scrolling down, we'll see that this vein here, the azygous vein, is receiving these posterior intercostal veins here, these ones. So the azygous vein is draining the chest wall, and that also empties into the SVC. Note that we've now crossed through the arch of the aorta, so you can see two separate profiles of the aorta here, as you can here, and we're also travelling through the bifurcation of the trachea. So the trachea bifurcates as you cross through the lower or inferior part of the aortic arch, and this is around vertebral level T4 or 5. If we keep scrolling down, we'll see that the SVC empties into the right atrium of the heart. So here's the SVC, here's the right atrium, here's the right atrium here. So the SVC is emptying into the right atrium. We'll keep scrolling down, all the way down to about this level of the heart now. Here's the right atrium with the left atrium behind it, and I want you to watch this vessel here. This is the coronary sinus carrying the venous drainage of the heart itself, and it is also emptying into the right atrium of the heart. We'll keep scrolling down and you'll see that another vessel here, the inferior vena cava, now highlighted here in the 3D window, also empties into the right atrium of the heart. We're going to scroll back up now. We'll remove the SVC and the IVC, and we'll scroll back up to around the level of the bifurcation of the trachea. Actually, what we'll do now is we will highlight the aortic arch, and we'll look at these vessels here. So you can see the three profiles of the major branches from the aortic arch. Again, if we scroll down, we'll see that as we approach the arch, those three vessels have now already come off it. We'll keep scrolling down now. Through the arch, two separate profiles at around the level of T4, T5, and the trachea has bifurcated. Follow the right main bronchus here. Note that it enters into the lung around vertebral level T5. Let's look at the left main bronchus now. it enters the lung a bit lower down at about T6. We're going to travel back up to the aortic arch here and add in the pulmonary trunk. So we said that as we cross through the arch of the aorta, we'd meet the top of the pulmonary trunk, so we're going to do that now. Through the arch of the aorta, and we should start to see the pulmonary trunk leaving the right ventricle. Here it is, heading into the left lung here on the left, and here's the right pulmonary artery on the right. If we keep scrolling down, we'll add in the pulmonary veins. As we scroll down, we should hit the pulmonary veins. Here are the pulmonary veins, and you'll see that they empty into the left atrium. So here's the left atrium, and you can see a pair of pulmonary veins here and segmental veins out in the lung parenchyma. Similarly, on the right hand side, you can see these two pairs of pulmonary veins. We'll keep scrolling down now, and you can see that we have also a four-chambered view of the heart at this level. So I'm going to remove some of these vessels, and we can see our four-chambered view of the heart. So here's the right atrium, here's the right ventricle, here's the left ventricle, and behind the left atrium. If we keep scrolling down, we should see a valve between the right and left ventricle. This is the tricuspid valve, and again on the left hand side, the mitral valve between the left atrium and the left ventricle. So we'll continue scrolling down through the heart. Note the thickness of the left ventricle compared to the right ventricle, which has a very thin wall. Relatively speaking, this right ventricle is only pumping up to the pulmonary circulation, left ventricle is pumping all the way around the heart. I'll keep scrolling down. There's the IVC, and we're now through the heart. I'll just scroll from the top down and look at some of these structures again to recap. Left brachiocephalic vein, right brachiocephalic vein, brachiocephalic trunk, left common carotid artery, left subclavian, uniting as they leave the arch of the aorta. Here's the trachea and the esophagus. As you pass through the arch of the aorta, the trachea bifurcates and the azygous vein empties into the SVC. Here's the right main bronchus, here's the left main bronchus, here's the pulmonary trunk. And as we scroll down, emptying into the left atrium are the pulmonary veins. We'll keep scrolling down and we should see the coronary sinus. Here's the coronary sinus emptying into the right atrium. And that concludes this tutorial.